Welcome everyone to the artist's talk of Hale Tenger and Anike Joyce everyone who's watching us online. This event is part of a video program called Garden Conversations. So we are not in a garden, but the garden is here, of course, a metaphor that we're going to speak also further. So this video program series that I've been curating in Museum für Neue Kunst Freiburg. The first program was called Hiding Our Faces Like a Dancing Wind with other artists, Yazan Khalili, Forensic Architecture, and Marian Mailan and Patrick Loza, which this artist talk can also be found on YouTube at the New Center's YouTube page. So Garden Conversations actually brings 3 video works from 3 artists. Hale Tenger's video Under, Anike Joyce Sadiq's Visited by a Tiger, and Bouchra Khalili's Garden Conversation, which gives the title of the video program. So I would like to first briefly speak about this video program before introducing the artists and diving into the conversation. So these 3 video works narrate conversations between different beings, between birds, hunters, and a tree, like in Hale Tenger's work, a psychologist, a book, and an artist in Anike Joyce Sadiq's work, and 2 revolutionaries, Ernesto and Abdelkrim Khattabi, a Moroccan anti-colonial leader from 1920s. So Bouchra couldn't be here today with us as she's preparing for her next project heavily, but I'm so pleased to have Anike and Hale. So few sentences. This video program is not only referring to political and psychological inspirations throughout history and ethics of international solidarity, but it also revolves around notions of freedom, eco-feminism, and justice. So through these engaging conversations, 3 different women from different generations and different geographical backgrounds created challenging works that generate their own methodologies and discourse. So thank you so much, Hale and Anike, committing your time and being with us tonight and sharing your insights and with your own words. I'm very pleased to be in conversation with you too. But of course, we are here. I also want to say thank you to the whole team of Museum für Neue Kunst Freiburg, to the director, from the curatorial staff and technicians, Christina Litz, Andreas Berger, Nora Fessefone Johnson, and Romina Caretta for all the dedication. And of course, not to forget Anja Schulte, who did the German and English translation, which is also very important work. And of course, Kashra Rahmanian and Mohammed Salemi from the New Center for making this conversation possible and for the live stream. And not to forget Merve Çağlar from the Nev Gallery Istanbul. I would also like to thank her. So instead of reading biographies of Hale Tenger and Anike Joyce Sadiq, where the both artists did many exhibitions, were in artist residencies and awards, but instead I would like to read maybe more content-wise about their practice. So Istanbul-based artist Tenger belongs to a generation of artists who contribute to the production of contemporary art and critical thinking as witnesses to the political unease in Turkey since 1990s, working meticulously and poetically around socially conscious topics such as collective memory and political violence in the past 40 years. Her recent works include themes of ecofeminism, ecological justice, and healing. And maybe a few personal words, because I studied art history in Istanbul, and I was trying to understand what does contemporary art mean at the time. And coming across with works of Hale Tenger in catalogs and books, and especially I would like to name two works: The School of I Don't Give a Fuck Anymore, 1990, and I Know People Like This Too. For example, I would like to say these were the major works that showed me what it means, what politics of installation and aesthetics of installation could mean, and how can we actually talk about or feel political issues in a three-dimensional space. So for me, on a personal level, they were very revolutionary, and also I think in the history of exhibition making and in art history of Turkey also. And Anike Joyce Sadiq, whom I met in Stuttgart during my time there, she lives and works in Berlin. But as I said again, I don't want to read a classical bio. Instead, choosing my own words, I would like to read a text from an artist, Justin Randolph Thompson, and because it's written so beautifully, so I'm borrowing his words. Anike Joyce Sadiq's oeuvre of installation-based work and social experimentation is informed by a dialogue between a legacy of rational works and post-colonial cultural theory. The complexity of this multifaceted combination results in a hybrid formalism and negotiation of an intrinsic value of personal space. The intimacy of her works and the humanity of their invasion of our consciousness rupture our ability to isolate cultural assumptions and produce a self-reflection that nonetheless removes us from a capacity for an entrenched subjectivity. So at this moment, I would like to share my screen with everyone. And for the people who couldn't come to Freiburg and see the video program, I invite everyone to watch experts from the videos. And please note that for both of the works, sound is extremely important. So you may maybe need to turn on and off the volume of your electronic devices, so it won't give you the effect in the museum space or an installation, but at least you will get hopefully the impression of the works. So I'm now going to share.
Long after hunters and gatherers, still in the time of plenty, can you be like a bird? It was a pastime named shooting, hunting no more. Under the same old rules of the game, of some will eat and some will serve. Can you be like a bird? Men set up nets in the forest, stretching low among the trees. The birds, framed underneath, could no longer fly high. Can you be like that too? Later on.
You were going about preparing all the equipment, and I was sitting quietly and milling around. At rest, integrated, we're both feeling comfortable, warm, and balanced. Then with the book that you gave me, we started this conversation about racism. And I knew already that this was an area that I kind of keep it at a distance because I can become very quickly emotionally aroused. But we entered that conversation and got deeper into that conversation, and all of the pain and suffering, struggle that is associated with that for me started quickly to emerge.
So, can you hear me back again?
Yes.
Very good. So after watching some experts from the works, I would also like to say both of these works are actually shown in loop, and of course with speakers. So this is just to give a little bit impression about the works. So I would like to start with Hale, and thinking and knowing that both of these video works, Visited by a Tiger and Under, highly poetic, mediative, and political pieces. So, dear Hale, we had numbers of conversations about the work Under, and I have always been fascinated by the story that you told me about the political article which you read. And the text is drawing an analogy between the birds and the people, a sense of freedom and a bird hunting technique. So it's a very specific technique, which I didn't know before. I learned it through your work. And your video manages to translate this bitter feeling, because it's not a very, this hunting technique, it's quite a unique one. And your video managed to translate this bitter thing into a moving image and sound. So can you start telling us about this process?
Well, maybe I should first mention that this work titled Under came to life first as an installation. I was invited by Maris Brito of Proto Cinema as a guest curator for the Al Serkal programming in Dubai. So I was commissioned to do an outdoor work. So it first came to life as an installation. How it came to life, as I was preparing, I remembered that I read a article somewhere online that mentioned metaphorically the harsh political condition in Turkey of this hunting technique. I didn't know either. So I thought I would like to use this. And first I started researching to find where I had read it. I couldn't. I got, medieval hunting books. And because it was this, the article I remembered was mentioning this as an aristocratic hunting technique, let's say, or a tradition. I couldn't find. And then I gave up the idea of going after this as a detective almost. So I said, okay, whether this is true or not true as a technique used by the aristocrats or not, I will use it in a poetic way, integrated into my work. But through that research, I came across information, sad information from my point of view, that even today, like only in UK, 45 million pheasants only, not other game birds are included, are artificially, in cages, etc., breeded and then sold or traded for hunters so they can shoot the birds, which is called a sport. And some of them, of these game farms that are breeding these birds for hunting, for sale, are proud that they are breeding their birds in open air, in nature, using nets. So then I was like, okay, so same stuff is going on, whether it is still in the hunting tradition or not. At least in the game bird industry, it is being used still. So that's the background story of how I started researching about it. And then, of course, it is so obvious that in the work I'm using it as the state we are living all around the world, you know, whether you call it democracy or totalitarian regime or everywhere around the world, we are under some kind of construction, a cultural, political construction, where justice is longed for by everyone. So justice is long gone, you know. We are searching for it. We keep searching for it. And in our daily life, in some of us, in our comfort, might forget that we are not under such, like the net in the installation, that we are not under such conditions. We tend to forget, like in Anike's work, you know, if you are under stress all the time, our physical condition is not built up for that. So you have to be creative to find solutions to cope with your daily life. You have to carry on with your daily life in a healthy way. So to keep your mental health, you start finding kind of creative ways to cope with it. So the work generally is in a, as you say, Didem, in a poetic way, talking about all these things, and also like some few lines referring to the economic system since ancient times, actually, that of this hierarchic system that we are living under. Whether you say from the most rich to the poorest, from the most in power in politics to the least in power or powerless ones, gender rights, this and that, you can think in all areas. And now, on top of that, we have the ecological crisis. So we are now talking about injustice of by humans to non-humans, living or not, including the whole planet, let's say. So yeah, maybe I should mention two more things. In the, maybe Didem, you would like to come back to this later, but besides a book that I had read a few years ago, which kind of formed a base for my most recent projects in the last few years. That's Edward de Cohn's How Forests Think Towards an Anthropology Beyond the Human. But now I would like to focus more on the other side, the other book by Ursula K. Le Guin's interpretation and notes, Tao Te Ching. It has become kind of focus in my life. I find myself going back to that book quite often. So the lines that are repeating in the video under can you be by not doing is an interpretation, like a I transformed it into a question, but it's stemming from Tao Te Ching, So there is, since ancient times again, the Chinese thinkers brought this into the thinking of, it's called Wu Wei, which we can translate into English like trying not to try. It's like, it's not like not doing anything, like just like sitting and not doing anything. It's not like that, but it's in a way like I interpret it in such a way like of our relentless, endless interference with nature, one-sided interference of using, extracting whatever we can, etc., but never giving back. So from that, I can also connect to Edouard de Cohn's book, maybe, how he's interpreting or rewriting anthropology, that we should think beyond the human, where his work is based in the Amazons with the Runa people that he spent about 5 years, and how they are constructing their daily lives day to day without the symbols as we know in our lives. So there is not that hierarchy in that system, but it's more like taking and giving back, taking and giving back. So it's all, you know, kind of togetherness of these ideas in the video. One more thing, maybe again, which I find quite enchanting. I would like to use the word because Edouard de Cohn uses it a lot. That both Anike's work and mine has the she voice. So for me, this is precious to use the she voice. So I would like, just wanted to mention this similarity, and for me, it is a very important and precious part of both two works.
And thank you, Hale, for this actually excellent wrap up to sharing your inspirational books and moments, and sharing this process with us. Anike, would you like to respond some of the things that Hale mentioned? Is there anything that you want to follow up?
Hello, actually. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for that we can have this conversation. Yeah, I mean, I think like there are a lot of like points which we have in common, also beyond like the female voice we can hear. But of course, that is actually an interesting point, you know, to have also in. You're also talking actually about like a human condition, but there's actually no body in the video we can see. You know, there's just the voice, and yeah, that's of course something like which is in my video. There is the hand, but the voice is actually like the narrating element. No, like yeah, like the main element almost. Then coming together like with this image and with the symbol. But I think like also having and bringing in this female voices is like a very important gesture, and something we have to do. Yeah.
So Anike, I would like to hear also more about your work. Your video work is based on a conversation you had with Afro-American Berlin-based psychologist, Dr. Lula Morton Dreves. It begins with a theoretical explanation of how the hand model of the brain works. And the second part is turning a very personal direction, which is talking about racism and traumatic experience. And actually, I will also come back to the sound again. We are only hearing Dr. Dre's part. We're only hearing her. And as a viewer, I have the feeling that you are having conversation with her, but we are not hearing your voice, but we are looking at your own hands. So I also like that, how you kind of bring these, you know, you hide your face, or I mean, maybe it's not hiding face, but we are not seeing your face. We are not hearing your voice. We are hearing her voice. So actually you kind of like team up there. I have the feeling. But the way you did the piece is that, so I have seen the work, I have watched the work in the room in Shawram, and as an audience, I have the feeling like I'm almost having this conversation with the doctor herself, because she's so genuine. She is so generous talking about her experience. So not to make long, some of the points, she's not an actress that you invited her to play. There was no prescript. And I think this is also feels very, very genuine. So what was your motivation in the beginning, and how did it evolve so naturally?
So I think I'm always saying that it's based on a conversation, because actually it was a longer conversation I had like with Lula Treves. And we had this conversation which were cycling around like these questions of racism and dealing with racism also on an everyday basis. And like this hand model, which she explains like in the first part of the video, she just did this like almost like a year ago now in a conversation we had. And she just like drew my awareness to this concept, which was already there by like another psychologist. And she just presented me like this model. So how someone, and actually children, can understand and how they got explained what's happening in their brain when they are in situations of stress. No, so Lula was like showing me like this is your brain. Like when everything's fine, the brain is like integrated, you know. And she was just like telling me this model, actually also as like an help for myself to understand what is actually happening in situations of stress. And this is not necessarily, was not connected to these questions of like how to deal with racism, no, because this is like a general thing to understand what's happening in the brain now when we are like confronted with stress. But when I saw Lula like showing me like this brain model, I of course saw like the black fist, no, like a black raised fist, no, when she did this. And this image somehow stayed with me for like quite a long time, because there this like two things actually came together, no. And when I then I was invited by Contemporary Ant for this exhibition in Houston at the library. I was like coming back to this image which I was like carrying, and for me it was, I think, like probably the first time that I had like an image in my mind which I already had the feeling it's a very strong image bringing this together now, like the fist and this model of the brain. You know, somehow even when I was like narrating this image, it was like working already. You know? So what I knew was that I somehow wanted to record Lula's voice, how she explained the brain model again. So I went and I came like with all my filmic equipment, and the plan actually was that we would record her giving again this explanation of like how the brain worked. You know? So this is then the first part. You know? She knew I was like coming and having like my equipment, and I wanted to shoot this video of like her explaining the brain model. And when I came, and this is then the second part of the video, where she picks up on actually what happened while I was like building up the equipment and the moment of the shooting, I brought her a book as a present. No? And the book was on like this topic of racism, and we also talked about books. She also recommended me before books I could read, and I was recommending books back, and this was like one of the books I was like giving her as a present, but also because I thought it would be interesting to her and our conversation we are having. And that's how she started actually the second part, you know. So when we were shooting, the second part was actually the first part, you know. So I gave her the book, then I said, I'm ready. And she said like she needs a moment, and she came back and she said like, okay, before we do like this recording of the brain model, I want to say something that just like happened, you know? And this is like the second part we are hearing. And this was like not planned. No, she was, and I asked her, is it fine if I'm recording this already? And she said yes. And yeah, and this is like just like yeah, it felt also like a present that she was like yeah, like giving to me actually, you know, because also when I was then later cutting the piece, the first part really becomes more like an introduction to then have like the second part, which almost feels like the actual part, you know, of the video. So the first part is like this explanation, and the second part is like really her personal narration of what happened in this moment when she was like confronted with this book and the trauma which came up. And yeah, for her it was always important to stress that her work as a psychologist is really about like these tools, Hale, you were also talking about, like this creative ways of like finding how to deal with the stress we are facing, be it from oppressive systems or everyday racism, no? And yeah, so, and she's just like mentioning this at the end, that becomes the end of the video then, no, when she says like she's dedicating actually her work and what she's doing to bring the thinking back, the thinking brain back online, no. And yeah, and actually I recorded much more, no. So we were also talking about a bit on like this tools and strategies which did not become part of the video you are seeing now, no. Yeah, but yeah, maybe so far, no. Your microphone.
There are two things that I want to mention briefly, and then I would like to ask to respond to Hale. Two things. The first thing is that the way you're speaking about how you work with her is that there is an invisible labor there, that your commitment and your conversation, a safe space, and there's a trust-based work. I think often, and I think that's a problem in a lot of works, is that I'm seeing the artist trying to make a work about a person, about a situation, and going and talking to people, but often it seems very staged and constructed. And the way, not of course, not all the works, and it's when the conversation is really real, it's based on a trust-based conversation, and then I think interesting things pop up, I think, in such real conversations. And your artistic dedication there, and I will insist saying that it's almost like an invisible labor, because as an audience or someone watching the work, we don't know what is happening on the background, but we can of course know it because how real it already feels. And the second thing is that being open to coincidences and surprises, that I think as an like artist or as a curator, cultural maker, however you plan, you need to be open for change and to adapt to this moment, the surprises that you're telling us, that how it played a role, and perhaps, you know, you had a certain plan, and same goes for Hale. I mean, the installation was an installation. There was not an idea to make a video work about it, but it all evolves by conversation with people and changing. So Hale, would you like to follow up and respond to Anike's words also?
Yeah, it just made me what Anike said and you have been saying of our warm conversation a few days ago, getting prepared for this online talk, that we were talking about coincidences, and that it was me actually saying that coincidences are maybe the best part of our lives, which I insist lately, because the world is ugly and justice is nowhere. So coincidences, enchanting ones maybe, are the best part. So yeah, actually we think that that's the problem of humanity. Actually, we think that we control, we think that we program, pre-program, and then do things, and we always think like, oh, everything is under control. But everything is open up to coincidences. You never know. Just now something can happen, earthquake can happen, and it would be the end of this conversation for one of us maybe. So you never know. But we carry on as if we are controlling things, but there's no such thing actually. It's beyond us. So just as with the video came to life by coincidence also, as I was preparing for the last touches in the studio for the sound engineering of the under installation, and I was like in few days ready to fly to Dubai. The sound engineer friend of mine, Hakan Kurşun, said, Hale, why don't you think about making a video from this? It would be a great video. And I was like, no, I mean, this is going to be an installation, I don't know, etc. But immediately I told him that I document my installations always, preferably by myself. But I told him, this documentation, if it's gonna be used in a video as an artwork, it would be beyond me. I won't be able to shoot it in that professional way. So he said, why don't you take Ali along, my husband, who is from film business. So I went back home that night, told Ali, maybe you should come along to Dubai for shooting. And he said, well, Hale, you never do one work from another work. So you have never done this. So he said, I don't think you will do it. I said, yeah, you're right. So I slept over. I woke up in the morning and I said, well, what if, and I would regret if I would not do the recording in a professional way. So I told him, maybe I won't, but why not, just come along and do the shooting for me. So he did come and did nicely did the job. It stayed. We did the installation documentation. It was online on Vimeo and over here at the Alsekar programming online website, etc. But then it just stayed. And then it was again Maris Brito. She was preparing a video tour program, and she said, Hale, did you work on this under video? I said, no. She said, will you? And I said, okay, let me try. So we started working on it. And then I was convinced that, yeah, it can have a life on its own besides the installation. So that's how it came up. Yeah, I mean, coincidences are everywhere. Maybe I should also say that in the video that the composition is by Serdar Ateşer, Sound engineer is Hakan Kurşun, and the dubbing artist is a musician, young, very talented musician, Ceren Türkmenoğlu. Actually, I just came across to her voice by coincidence again at Hakan Kurşun's studio when we were doing the final, the initial meeting for the upcoming project. And I was looking for a she voice, and I searched international professional through the agencies, English, native English speaking voices, she voices, and I didn't like any of them. Once we finished the meeting in his studio, it was Serdar, him and me, then he said, maybe let me make you listen to an unfinished piece that I have been working on. So it was Ceren's voice in the song. It was a jazz interpretation. And I said, do you think I can reach out to her? Because I really liked her voice. And he said, okay, you can try. But sometimes singing voices are not so good in speaking voices, but it turned out very good. So that was another coincidence on my side.
But what I like to say at this point is, I think one of the first conversations we had, Hale, about the program and about the work is that I remember I was telling you that she's not reading, she's not singing, but she's performing it. So that she's performing it in a very, very, very specific way, very atmospheric, as if I could really feel that you and her had a lot of discussions about the content of the work, because you wrote the text and it's very poetic, and it has a lot of metaphors. It's very beautiful, and of course now it also makes sense a lot when you refer to this political article that you read and all this like bird hunting technique. But this intimacy, and that's it really touched me. I mean, I was writing to Galeri Nev, to Merve, can you please send me the link? I want to video and this whole thing. And that was the first thing. Of course, the perspective of the camera is that when you're watching it, you really put yourself in the place of the bird because of the perspective, but there is still a bit hope because you are looking at this blue sky. But the work is immersive. The work is immersive. The position of the camera, the way you filmed it, the way you edited, and I think all this work and thoughts behind it is very visible. So so that was perhaps like my comment. I would like to also actually hear more about what were your criteria also in your conversation with her. But Anike, is there anything you like to follow up from what Hale said?
Yeah, I think like this, the aspect of like the openness or also the coincident is something that is like important in like, also like in other works I did. I think like this like really being also like process orientated, which is maybe in this case and for this video, not the best example, no, because it's not only like an openness, because the image itself is like highly staged, no? The image itself is like very, it's like very thought of and like very staged. But to have like this openness in the process of like starting and not knowing, I think like it's like, actually it's like a deeply artistic practice itself, no? To not have like a fixed goal, but just to go and to stay open to see where it takes you, and then I was like thinking, because you mentioned like this invisible labor. Now, for me, invisible labor is always something that is like happening in the background and is maybe not really appreciated also, no? And of course, like we don't see Lula Morton Dreves, and we just like hearing her voice. But I also want to stress, although we are having this conversation, I did have like a great budget and I paid her well, no? And this was also like something, this was also like the point I thought about inviting Lamine Fofana, no? Because I knew I have a budget and I can pay the people I want to work with, no? And so there is, I'm not sure if I would call it like invisible labor, no, because of course there is invisible labor, which is like building trust and building a relationship, no. But then like all of my work and all, I guess also what Hale is doing is like very rooted on the experience we make and of the relationships we have and all of the books we read and like our being in the world, no. So my work is like highly informed by being a person of color in Germany, no. So this is like the position I'm speaking of. And before you were like also saying like, we don't see myself, I'm hiding, and like also looking at like other works I'm doing, no, there is like, I'm there, but I'm not there at the same time, no. And of course, this also has something to do with like being a person of color in Germany and the experience I made, no. So I think I'm also like trying to find a way to talk like about like this notion of like being there and withdrawing myself at the same time. And I think it really comes from this thinking about representation, you know, because of course I'm like, for me, it's important to have Lula's voice, to have my voice heard, even if it's like not even my physical voice speaking, no, but like every work I'm doing is somehow my voice, no. And yeah, and there is the hand, and as we had before this moment when you said like it could be anyone's hand, and I was like no, it's my hand, no, I want like actually the position I can speak of is like my own, no, I don't want to make like a general thing. If like other people can like somehow find a way to connect with the work, this is the best that can happen, no, but I don't want to present anything I'm doing as like an objective thing, no. And yeah, and this question of like representation of like being there as a body, but at the same time somehow withdrawing my body, has to do with the gaze. And I think like always yeah, being with like my own body in my artworks, it's always to a conversation on the gaze, no. And like I really love Wu Zhang's title of the exhibition he had at the Kultusbau, when he said like there's no non-violent gaze, no, or no, the title was there's no non-violent way of looking at somebody, no. So what is the way of like representing without like withdrawing from this violent gaze, but still be there and representing my position, no. And I think like, yeah, it's a negotiation between like being there and not being there, and that's like this element of, yeah, of having the hand there and not. I have to check if there was like something else. Oh, I think like so far. Yeah.
But this is something that is very, I would say, common in your work, like the things that you're like the use of your own body, your like self. And when I think of all these installations, all these works where also the interaction with the audience, or the audience is actually making the work, and that you always somehow being in the work, but at the same time not being. I think it's actually Hale mentioned it a few days ago. That reminds me of it now, actually spontaneously. I think Hale was saying, I don't know, it was you or Hale, I think it was Hale, this state of liminal, being in the liminal. And I think it fits very much about this kind of, because I think the dealing with representation is, it's a very difficult topic, and there are ways of dealing with it, and the gaze and the representation. And I think your quote from the Martis Gropian's Bau exhibition is beautiful. So I just want to comment on that. This is like kind of phenomenon that it's not only in this work, but I think for your work, it's one of the major topics.
Yeah, I really think also like that there's a general misunderstanding of like representation, what representation means. That representation is not necessarily like the depiction, So we are in visual arts, so like showing or being there with my body is always like the depiction, of like my body, but this is like not the representation I'm actually interested in, The representation is like really like almost like being like almost like an agency or like a substitute of like there is someone who's like talking for me, who's like who's advocating my positions, like yeah, I mean also in our dealing with institutions, nowadays, this is like, I think representation is something, it's like the problems is somewhere there, in this like idea of like what representation actually means and should be.
I'd like to add something like I think that we're talking about this intimate feeling it creates because it's your hand, that we know that it is your hand. But then also, I think besides your ideas and behind why you wanted your own fist over there, you could have maybe taught someone how to do it, to act for you, but it won't be maybe as powerful, because in the video we sense that the hand is like a body, and it's mimicking. It's I mean, if you would tell someone to do it for you, it would look more mechanical, I think. But there are parts in the video that you feel like even the fingers are like moving separate entities from each other, etc. So it's really flowing beautiful in that sense, and that's why I guess it becomes more immersive when you're watching together, of course, with the narration. And in our previous conversation we were talking about this and I mentioned fabulation, as Hannah Arendt puts it. So I think it's a kind of fabulation, what you are doing and what I'm doing. So it's not like representation or narration only, but like we are transforming the known, taken for granted things, and then we are turning them upside down. So we are offering another way of looking at them, using images, of course. This is our business. That's what our practice is founded upon. So we are trusting on images, but we're using images, but like making a new way of looking at things, and in a transformative manner. I find that also in both your video and my video, like parallels to each other. The she voice, not only, it couldn't be a he voice, for example. It wouldn't work in your video if I would hear it, a he hand, a he talking. So these are all
yeah. I think like the thing about like my hand is then I think it's more like the female voice, which is important. It's also about like having a hand of a person of color. So the same thing with like a white fist is like a different story, So what I say when I say like it's important that it's my fist, I actually mean it's important that it's a fist of a person of color now in this context and in this narration. But I think like what you're also referring to of how the hand moves, I have really to give credit to the post-production, which was done by Sebastian Budirski. And I really was interested to have like this conversation between like the image, the moving image, but also about like a sculptural moment of like having the fist almost like a sculpture represented in this image setting. And then of course there is also like the voice, the sound of Lamin Fofana. I mean, he has like this whole own practice of dealing with theory, Black studies, post-colonial theory, and sound. And I was like very happy that he said that he would like work with me on the video. And I think like similar to the experience with your video of like having like this immersive moment, which then really at least when you're like confronted with the piece in the space, and in your case even more in the installation, the sound is like really something that resonates like with the body. So actually the sound is also like the element which really brings our own bodies in as the ones who are watching, and the video pieces. So I really think this is also an interesting moment.
Yeah, I guess that that this created spaces that we are talking about, whether through a video or installation, liminal spaces, they are actually, so which are liminal in the sense that they are not like four squares. They're open spaces. It's a liminal, the liminality of it that makes it open. Like the next step after that is up to the person. So in that way, they can also be thought as being transformative. So they are like cognitive spaces, creating space for the viewer to, digest what he or she is encountering with, and through cognitively, like through thinking and senses. So it's like it's a mixture. So I think that suits more to our times, because we don't know where we're heading. We don't know how our next day will be actually. So liminal space, I think, is quite important in that sense, to open up for the audiences.
Yeah, I like this notion of like liminal space. I haven't thought of it so much. I mean, I always thought of like also the installation as like a space of experience we can make together by like being confronted like with art, or like in this moment of like looking at art. And actually I was always interested in like more creating the situation of experiences as a base of where we can start to have a conversation with each other, and the different experience we made, like seeing the same artwork, but maybe reacting to it differently, and having different views on it. And I think like to have like these spaces, which probably are also liminal spaces, they are like urgent, maybe also, to find like this ground and this start of like having conversations actually.
Yeah.
I would like to follow up on this, like thinking with like liminality and transformation. I think what also makes the two works very like real, or like very valuable experiences to watch them, is that they are actually really transforming a particular state of mind. because, for example, like there are so many things that inform your work, like book, article, encounters, but there, for example, with under, it's a very tough situation. You're actually, it speaks that people, there are a lot of problems, there are a lot of human rights problems, but there are also a lot of issues, environmental issues, ecological catastrophes, and this metaphor of, I mean, even this, like, we hear the wing of a bird very clearly. I mean, you really, the whole video creates a space that is taking you in, and you feel inside of this room locked. So there are a lot of people unjustly imprisoned, and there's so many things, I think, that also maybe wants to kill us slowly, or like the people. So this problems of injustice, so it's very heavy, actually, when, I think you, like, both of you also, like, I think we should also perhaps, like, talk about, like, yeah, like oppression and death. I mean, when you really, like, look behind, or like the violence, so there's this really, I think, huge, very, like, disturbing things. I mean, it's for me, for example, when I was having moderating artist talk with Anike at Kunst Mannheim, for me it was impossible not to mention what happened in Hanau, because I can't watch this work about racism in Germany and not talking about, there is an initiative, Hanau, and people are fighting to be seen, to be talked, and to address the urgent issues, and also state politics and all that. So there is all these, I think, problems that we are in the middle of it. But I think that's also why I always say, and it's poetic. I use it, like, again and again, like, very poetic, because this transformation, this liminal, is actually perhaps is how you're feeling as an individual, like you're feeling about all these things, but it's translating about how it's translating also, it talks to me. That's also how I feel. That's, the moment when you can't breathe, but that you're searching for hope. And I also want to come back. I think it's actually very good that you refer to this. It's my hand, and it could be anyone's hands. And that's the thing. Of course, it cannot be like anyone's hands. It's your hand, but it represents struggle for a lot of people. So that's like that. It's perhaps the starting point is you, like, how individually feeling, but it's, in a way, at the end, it will be maybe kitschy, but it is universal.
Yeah, actually, I think urgency, as Anike said, is our daily problem, because everything is urgent at the moment. Injustices, before we come any close to human injustices, now we are overwhelmed by the ecological crisis, which is for thousands of years been done by the human, the injustice to the planet Earth, including humans and non-humans. So we are, like, really on the threshold of this urgency. So if I mean, on my side, I think if we are able to create some kind of a transformative space for any individual, if we can touch someone, that's the best we can do. because the daily the through the media it's not happening. Most of the media is controlled. I'm not talking about Turkey. Media is almost lost in Turkey. It's only the non-governmental controlled ones maybe we can talk about, but they're also under a lot of oppression. But all around the world, this hierarchical thinking and controlling politics, economics, etc., including everything. We are under such an urgency, but we don't have the tools to overcome of all the problems, which are so huge, including all the injustices. But all we can do is like touching person by person, day by day. I guess that's all we can do. And I find that also quite important, because there are no revolutions. Everything happens one by one, hand by hand, day by day. I don't know.
And yeah, I just wanted to, maybe it's not helpful, but to add actually the health crisis now with like the corona we are also facing, and a lot of people are affected by what it means for them on a daily basis right now. And it doesn't mean that like other problems are then not happening. No, we are having like all these problems at the same time, and they are doubling up. No, and for me, it also felt that this Corona time, at least at the beginning, was like really like a catalyst for all these other problems which were there already for a long time, but then like all of them almost exploded, at the same time. And this I did the piece last year, in autumn last year, so before Corona, and before we had like in Germany for the first time like this like really Black Lives Matter movement, people going out, although activists had been like working on these issues for like a long time. And I think like this is like for several areas the same case. But yeah, also with like Visited by a Tiger, I really felt like I think like it was also the first time that I had the feeling there is like something, and I really needed to be out there, because it was somehow helpful to me to understand like this explanation, which is in the first part, was like very important for me. And I was like thinking a lot about if I would have known about this earlier, what it would have meant for me. And that is maybe also the reason why I transformed it into a publication, and I made an edition, and we're like thinking about like other materials, how this work can exist and travel and also reach people at the same time. And because like what's in there, also thinking about like mental health and how we are responsible to care for ourselves and take care for ourselves and try to understand what is happening is so important, because we need to be equipped for all these other fights we are facing and all these other problems we are having. So I'm often thinking like how can like this revolution of the depressive look like? Like I feel like so many of us are depressed, and struggling like with their mental health, and at the same time, actually we need to be here and fight. So how can these two things like go together somehow? And I really think what is like most important, to have like this friends and people surrounding you in the professional art field, but also like in the personal fields, who build a support system somehow, and who are there to support each other somehow, to face what we have to face, to stay with the trouble of the world,
And it's incredibly empowering, Anike. I'm glad that you mentioned this, because there there is this certain empowerment happening in your work. I mean, the way you say that, you know, it comes something like very personal, but who is in this world, that the world is going such a heavy times, that everyone is facing a stress because of all this oppression, all this difficulty, or all these injustices, that waking up angry. I mean, it's so I'm following you know, the media in different languages, and it's like all of us, and waking up to like bad news, but there is something there to caring for your health, and like kind of like being aware of certain things and to react. And I think there is absolutely this aspect in your work, is that, okay, this is, you know, I may be visited by a tiger on daily basis, but I'm going to listen what the doctor is saying, like in a theoretical and emotional level. So it's in a way like very beautiful, because you don't feel alone. And I think also Hale's work is like under so many things, under so many people. And I think this feeling of like not feeling alone, and this solidarity, I think this means a lot, because such works also create situations where people gather and talk and feel, oh, I feel the same way. And then you identify yourself. I think that's also what happened in an emotional level, because I mean, as a curator, I listen my, that I want to be emotionally honest when I'm working on the program. And I think both of the works, I think, talk to my heart. And I think there are a lot of people who's watching us at the moment, or watching the work and feel part of it. And it's very beautiful.
I also really like that, like with Hale's work and my work, there's like generations of like she voices or female voices somehow meeting, you know, because she has like the younger female voice, and I have like the older female voice. And like also for like, yeah, for my whole life, I think like there had been strong women around, which were like really important, you know, to see them, to have them, to see how they are dealing with the world, and being inspired by them, you know. And I really think like Lula Morton-Treves is one of these persons, I think, which are like highly inspiring, you know. And today I just had the feeling, and I wrote her a text saying like, I almost wished like every person of color in Germany could meet you and have a conversation with you. But this is like also something, yeah, which is already like in the work of it, you know. But yeah, yeah.
Yes, absolutely, because it's actually really nice that you said it, because that's what it happens. Like, I don't know if she's watching us right now. That would be very actually nice to involve her also. But this is exactly what's happening, is that anyone who's watching, who feel the same way, and that you are creating the situation as if the viewer is having this conversation. So that's yeah, I think that's very touchy and real. So I would actually at this moment like to ask, just in case if there is anyone who have a burning question from the viewer. I think in Zoom there is a chat possibility, but you can also, like, if anyone watching on YouTube, you can basically write me on social media, or write me quickly to, I think Kasra is also on YouTube. Perhaps you can also comment on or chat on YouTube if there are any reflections. I guess we've been talking
A lot.
quite some while, quite some while. Yeah, it's been like very, very exciting and very interesting. I think I'm also planning on, there will be a YouTube documentation, but I'm also planning on scripting perhaps like maybe a summary of the conversation, to have it also in perhaps in a written format to document the conversation. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Didem, for like bringing us together and having this conversation, which is hopefully an ongoing conversation now, and not ending here, but starting.
Yeah, I feel that same thing, you know. I feel like as if it's a start, and hopefully one day we'll be able to get physically together.
Yeah, this is great to know, and to be able to speak about your works, not only just watching them and reading about them, but thank you for your generosity also. It's also, I have to say, it's not very common that the artists are speaking so openly in a very personal, open way, including the coincidences, including your own personal research, the books that you read, and your conversations. So I think that's also something that I value and appreciate a lot. And I think perhaps, okay, at the moment there is no question. Perhaps we I think perhaps already answered all the questions that we are speaking in detail. So if there are no questions, I would say yes, it's not the end, but it's the beginning of a new conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Didem. Thank you so much, Anike. And thanks to the
museum for making
the New Center research team. Yeah,
of course, Kasra and Mohammed.
Yes, thanks, Kasra and Mohammed.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.